My pleasure to introduce Aleem Lakhani from Amtrust Specialty Risk Group. He's going to speak about global warranty trends outside of the automobile industry as well as inside technology.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending, and thank you for the invitation to be able to present to you on our experiences with respect to what we see as the trend that's going to be taking place across the board. The insurance industry is being challenged presently, particularly with disintermediation in the fintech and insurtech area in the industry. And one of the areas that's ripe for a lot of transformation is the warranty industry. And so today I'll speak a little bit about that, specifically within the automotive, and then what I see as a convergence as a result of the digital transformation we're experiencing in the entirety of the warranty industry. It's really all about IoT as the primary basis that is spiriting the transformation in our industry. The ability to be able to garner a tremendous amount of information related to the activities of products and then be able to customize solutions that are specifically related to the same. The IoT market itself is forecasted to grow to over $11 trillion by 2025. And the distribution is in almost every sector, from health to retail to buildings, homes, and particularly automobiles. And so what we see is the ability for these devices to be able to sense information and be able to employ that information to manage the product and manage the experience that the end user has significantly differently. So today we'll deep dive a little bit more into the automotive and into other categories as well. The primary catalyst for the transformation starts really with mobility and the ubiquity of the smartphone and tablets in the market. It's given so much accessibility and information to individuals that it's the primary thrust for why we can embark on so many changes in our marketplace. The second is really related to data and the ability to garner such volume and at such a high velocity of data that's available on each device, and with the multiplicity of sensors that are there to be able to again make sense of that and then employ deep learning, artificial intelligence to be able to really make sense and employ it in how we act related to the same. A tremendous amount of automation, and here we're seeing processes like RPA and robotics, but also as much of this is being developed through APIs so that workflow processes can be augmented into existing streams of businesses. Embedded devices, which is the primary basis for being able to garner all of this information and be able to affect the entire product life cycle. And fundamentally, being able to add all of these devices, and I'll come back to this, is the growth of platform as an economy. We've seen the evolution from software as a service. Now we're moving into platform as a service. And what this allows is the ability to be very nimble and fast and being able to offer a multiplicity of services by divesting having to build the application and having to be able to easily, through APIs, add all the relevant services that you need to be able to support. Cloud has changed the economics of being able to develop applications and support applications relative to conventional methodologies. And finally, because of all of this information and data and the visibility associated with that, we've seen a transformation in the expectations of all the stakeholders. So from the consumer, the visibility, transparency has created a sense of accountability, but also a demand for a high degree of personalization to be able to engage with them. Secondly, with respect to entities like ourselves, the move towards being more dynamic related to the needs of those consumers, because now we have data on a specific basis. So a transformation into the UBI model, use-based insurance model, and I would posit that even the value-based model that we've seen in the healthcare industry moving into all the other sectors, particularly automotive and even in other consumer categories. Underlying all of this is the need for robust security, because all of this data is at high risk, and particularly with machine-to-machine learning, what we're seeing is the growth of that particular data presenting high risk. And one of the key impediments today from consumers that we've surveyed and what we've seen in the marketplace is their primary concern is with respect to the data and what's being done with that data, and secondly, how secure that data is. So it's vital to be able to maintain that. But these are some of the primary drivers. In the automotive industry, when we look at it specifically, there are 5 particular trends that we see that are stimulating some of the changes and the disruption in the marketplace. One is the connected car and the smart car itself. This is not autonomous cars, but just the fact that cars are being able to emit more data and more information today. And so what we're expecting is over 250 million vehicles that are considered smart or connected by 2020. Shared, we're seeing the growth of the shared economy and the shared vehicles, so ride share and car share. That's presenting another dynamic in the way we need to address it in our industry, and we're expecting it to grow to over $6 billion in value by 2020. When we look at electrification or electrical vehicles, it's at early stages and still being developed and refined and becoming more reliable. And once we hit that tipping point of 10 to 20% of adoption, there's an expectation that this will really skyrocket. And so we're expecting to see about 140 million electrical vehicles by 2030 and then accelerating thereafter. When you look at electrification and shared economy together along with autonomous, it's going to transform the industry very significantly and is part of the broader mobility as a service solution, or indeed even greater transportation as a service solution. Updates is another area that's very significant. This allows you to use software over the air to be able to update vehicles. And so now that life cycle, notwithstanding cars in the marketplace being 11 years old, the fact that cars get refreshed on a regular basis in terms of model iteration, with updates, that's going to bring that life cycle down to 1 year. So the vehicle's longevity may change very significantly. We certainly see that in the Tesla market as an example. And then autonomous vehicles is really the ultimate to level 5, where we can see complete autonomy in vehicles. And a lot of us who attended consumer electronics or here at NADA are all addressing the fact that autonomous vehicles are here, growing rapidly, and this will also change the landscape and how the insurance industry will have to address it. So one of the areas that we've worked on, and through collaboration with Axiom as well, that we've been delighted to get the intellectual capital of your experience in how consumers are behaving, particularly in the digital world, as you lead that particular, our industry in terms of digital transformation. It's very informative about how consumers are behaving. And secondly is, as we continue to experience the digital transformation, how that's going to be even more transformative in the customer journey. So historically, individuals have traditionally gone into dealerships to determine which vehicle they want and go through the procurement process individually. They then go through the experience of using the vehicle, and if they've purchased a vehicle service contract, really they're governing the utility of that product and the performance of that product based on the self-sufficiency of the tools that are given within that vehicle, but nothing more. And so it's a highly reactive process. Should an issue emerge, it's initiated by the consumer through, traditionally it's been a unit channel approach in terms of them embarking on the claim request, engaging people traditionally through telephone or standard mediums of communication, and then going through some kind of a laborious process of rectification. So with technology, we're seeing a transformation in that. And so the stage that I think most of are at right now is where digital mediums are now augmenting the existing workflow processes. So what becomes even more relevant is the fact that with the amount of information that's available there, and consumers utilizing the internet in particular to do their research before they really go through the purchase process, it's estimated that between 60 to 90% of consumers do all their research before they even walk into a shop. And indeed, looking at some more recent data as well, we recognize that most of the consumers that are going in there are really going in only to complete the sale. They're not necessarily going in there to learn more about the vehicle itself. They're doing all of that online. So now what we're seeing is the OEM, the dealership, and I use crowdsourcing as a method to say whether it's reviews or other internet sites that are from which they can garner information. They're using that to narrow their choice of product and then going into the dealership, primarily to be able to do a test drive and then negotiate the process of pricing and obtain all the financing and any other services that they need. So now we're seeing both dealership and online as a process. And the transformation that is taking place within the dealership is the need to not be a generalist anymore, but to be really specific in terms of the services that they offer and the expert knowledge which the consumer doesn't gain from the internet. The need to have more digitally rich features in the transaction process online is very key. So the ability to be able to configure your vehicles, select your features and benefits, even do all the financing and everything is becoming even more relevant to augment in this area. And this is where V-Purchase and the kind of tool set that Axiom has built is particularly salient as opposed to just a traditional e-commerce site. That isn't adequate. So the e-commerce that you see in general retail and consumer goods isn't the same methodology or the journey as this. It's a higher ticket item. There's more configuration capabilities as opposed to buying an article. And so consequently, the necessity for the way the online process has to work is significantly much richer than you would see in a general commodity. Next is because you've got digital assets like mobile devices, tablets, and everything like that, and tool sets now that you have even with Covey and Moxa and tool sets like that where you can have your contract online, you can initiate contact to the TPA, you can engage with service providers to be able to get the fulfillment of your needs according to that service contract. There's an ability to engage. With that, there's also more data that comes out in terms of how people are engaging with you, what are they doing with that, and what are the additional services that are required in that process. So there's a rich amount of information that we may have had an absence from related to the vehicle experience that's starting to come in here. In addition to that, as these vehicles and these devices allow for the ability to capture information without actual connectivity to the ports in the vehicle, there's also other telematic data that's becoming available. So the entire driver experience and utility now becomes much more available to us so that we can develop better models of the kind of coverages, but also recognize, whereas today it's around driver behavior, the opportunity to do much more with that. So now when we go through the claim experience, you have a multi-channel approach as opposed to the omni-channel of just dialing in or uni-channel, and then now you're able to engage with the consumer through different mediums of communication. So there's much more visibility for the consumer. There's much more accountability on our side of the equation to be able to provide a lot of that information. The next is moving to where with sensory information, we can see a complete transformation in the model. So now in the pre-purchase process, in addition to this ability to be able to get data on what is happening with respect to products, you're able to engage in a more robust comparative shopping exercises. There's more data that's coming from devices that are being collected into these crowdsourcing entities, so you can actually see more detailed information about products and services that you want. Now trusted authorities are able to channel much more of that information and leverage that to be able to provide more data and more experiential information related to products. Now what we're seeing is a tremendous willingness for consumers, because this data and transparency exists, a desire to conduct a lot of the business online. I mean, we already see where you have a vending machine for a car and ability to have a car delivered to you and picked up and do all of the fulfillment related to that without having to leave your home. This is just going to get stronger in terms of consumers, as long as what the online process does is it augments the experience with the things that are necessary that are derived from the dealership environment. So one of the things that a lot of consumers talk about is they want to be able to negotiate price. They want to be able to get a test drive, and you can use augmented reality as a methodology to give them an experience with that vehicle, so that, because that's a salient part of the trigger to conclude the transaction, you can do all of that and then have all of the capabilities to do trade-in, finance, all online in a much more expeditious manner without the stress, which is what consumers want. They don't want to feel that they are being imposed upon in any way. You can do this at your convenience, and that's a key determinant in how they're going to be able to do it and shop. Now, with embedded devices and sensors, we get a tremendously different profile of the experience that a consumer has with their vehicle. So it isn't just about driver behavior now. We can actually understand the way the vehicle is performing. So our ability to be able to engage on a highly personalized level rather than the traditional reactive methodology that we've seen in the industry, this allows us to get much more proactive. By virtue of that, we can get into initiatives that are related to the monetization and to also behavioral modification. So with respect to monetization, for example, Vitality has developed an application for the health industry that we see in North America, but also they do it in the automotive, but related to automotive insurance. And what they're trying to do again is garner as much information and then reward them with micro-reward system. So I think this concept of micro-reward is an area that has tremendous opportunity to facilitate first driver behavior, but also the value proposition that we provide, which is a mutual role that both the buyer and the seller have in terms of fulfillment of the obligations of the service contract. So much more capability to engage with the consumer based on their needs. From an operational perspective, a tremendous amount of data now so that we can engage in self-healing. This is an area of tremendous growth in a lot of product categories, and this just allows us remotely to be able to fix problems that are automatically seen. Consumers want the fact, they don't want to have any problems. So with sensory information, we should be able to, particularly with software over the air, make changes and rectify those problems. Certainly engage in preventative maintenance, very precise diagnostic, and therefore be able to really improve the way the supply chain works and the logistics to really improve the speed of the execution of the services, but also the experience that the consumer will have, and for us all in terms of cost. Now we can ensure that it's really deployed in a service environment that has the part, that has the skill, and can execute it. And in fact, we can do this from a preventative manner rather than having it after a breakdown in which the cost could be significantly higher. Now we go into the claim experience, and this is going to be an omni-channel experience, so any which way the profile of information is available so that we have all of the data, we have all of the analytics related to the product's performance or the vehicle's performance. All of that will be augmented with the way that they communicate to us, so we have a rich understanding of what the problem is and the consumer's lifestyle associated with that particular product to be able to execute in the service fulfillment in a much more dynamic and frictionless environment. And that's really the key. I mean, if we look at a lot of the enterprises, and particularly in the retail marketplace and in every other environment where transactions are occurring, the king is the consumer. And it's interesting to see the cyclicality of how consumer or customer services has taken place. It's gone from being paramount and then diminished with other efficiency variables becoming salient. And today, because the power of knowledge, of the information that's available and the consumer demanding to earn their business and to retain their business, you being able to deliver this at an exceptional level, it's very key that we have as much information to execute correctly. So this is what I really think is the true disruption. Sensory information being able to really change three primary areas. One is the personalization and the ability to ensure that we deliver value and services to the end user the way that they want to. Secondly is sensory information changes the operational paradigm because it provides us with a wealth of information to be able to ensure that we diagnose problems in advance, and if we don't, the fulfillment of those services are executed with all the efficiencies that are required to be able to ensure the longevity and reliability of that particular vehicle. And then finally is it opens up new business opportunities for us, because now that we have all of the data, not only is there an opportunity for monetization, but now we can start augmenting new services, managed services, and subscription services programs for which consumers are willing to clearly pay for those services to get better value from their product. That's what I think is the true disruption that's going to be taking place. The other part of this is that same disruption that we're seeing in the automotive, we're seeing in all the other areas. And I've just picked on two other areas, which is health and home, two areas that we concentrate on. So smart homes and smart health, or digital health, or connected health, or mobile health. And these are all areas that are transforming. And when we look at it, we see significant growth coming in the near future. Health is probably the area that has the least amount of adoption with the smart devices, but significant in chronic care, but not necessarily in general. We're seeing it with fitness devices, where there, I think, in excess of 1,000 apps right now that are out there for fitness and wellness, and consumers are using it to govern their conduct. But those devices which allow for monitoring can help improve overall health and wellness. And so we started seeing, for example, John Hancock offer a solution where you can get a Fitbit. They give you a Fitbit because they assume that you'll walk better, track yourself better, and manage your lifestyle a lot better. So we're starting to see insurers getting involved with recognizing that there's inherent value in the data to be able to ensure that customers are acting congruently with what the expectations are. So in the home, it's about security and comfort, certainly comfort and convenience for the end user, but from an insurer's perspective is the integrity of that home. So having primary devices that can detect, for example, fire, theft, or break-ins, and also water damage. Those are the key areas that yield a lot of claims. And then in the automotive category as well, which has connectivity. So in addition to the fact that this information allows for each individual to be able to improve their overall quality of life and productivity and the characteristics that I've identified there, the second thing that's important is that they're all working interactively. So the vehicle is able to monitor your health and be able to govern what you want to do in the home. Alexa is a very good example of where the future is going. Now by inserting that in there, and being able to, through voice command, able to execute the fact that you want all these conveniences and services in your home environment while you're in your auto to be able to execute. Now, I think Mercedes and other vehicles are also capturing health information, like your heart rate and everything like that, and that becomes salient. So this is becoming so permeable that the reality is that all of the data can be collected in all of these environments interchangeably to govern this entire series of activities that we may have in very disparate areas. So that presents a huge challenge, which is if we're going to, by 2030, expect 1 trillion devices, embedded devices in the marketplace. I was at a LiveWorks conference with PTC some time ago, and one of the things that was presented was that to support 1 trillion devices, they expected to have 50 million apps. Well, I can't imagine how we are going to govern if the home is expected to have 500 connected devices by 2020, how we are going to have 500 apps on our device to be able to govern it. It's not going to work. And so there's going to be a need for an ecosystem that can support each of these individually as a first step, but then interactively on all of this. And so the challenge becomes things like the standards. So you've got Zigbee, Z-Wave, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi. So standards have to be developed, and we're starting to see entities picking what they want. So for example, many have chosen Z-Wave and the Alliance, but recently you had Amazon choose Zigbee. So we're seeing Google have their environment, we're seeing Amazon have their environment, and so there isn't a congruence or a consensus into which standard, but they're picking their homes, and people will have to build around those ecosystems. But it's absolutely imperative so that you can have multiplicity of devices that can work seamlessly and be able to deliver the value proposition, which raises the most important thing that we need to work towards, which is a platform, and a platform as a service solution. And so things that are being done, for example, with Axiom are on the journey towards building this kind of a platform. And it may start first with automotive. This is an illustration of an architecture that I'm putting together that speaks to how the entire ecosystem may start working. But they should really start with one, which is the vehicle. And then it'll move to the entire transportation as a service or mobility as a service, just as much as home, health, and how the individual is. And so these devices that are here with the embedded sensors, the key thing is going to be the APIs where the information can come through the gateway and governed by various protocols. The back office is what the platform provides value in, which are all these engines to be able to churn this data, to be able to deliver the value through these interfaces, and having all of the right applications, so from the dashboard to the wallet, voice I've added in here as an example, and a host of other services, so that the interface that you have with the end user is a homogeneous and holistic experience. So this is where I think, maybe idealistically, we have to get to at some point, but it'll start with each one of these as verticals in a platform environment as we see. So again, I really believe that Axiom is a very good example of an industry leader that has embraced technology to lead how to support consumers in the generation that we're experiencing today. The digitally native audience and consumers. And it's interesting, as much as I have heard about millennials and Gen Y not wanting to buy vehicles, the data doesn't support that. The data doesn't support the fact that, yes, we all use Uber or Lyft, or we use any kind of ride share, and some of us use car sharing services. But there is not a single data point that I have seen. And when you looked at the other value, which was that it would grow to 6 billion, when you can't contrast it to 80 billion just in the automotive space as an example, or 200 billion in other spaces, it tells you very clearly that we have a long way to go. And what I'm seeing as one of the main reasons, among some of the main reasons why consumers have not embraced this, is because they still don't like to share their vehicle. That's one of the main reasons. They like the privacy. So even though the average user of a vehicle only drives 1 hour a day, and we will have to address the total cost of ownership of a vehicle, I think that's where the compelling case for electrical vehicles is very strong, because the price, the cost per mile is significantly lower. And there's so many other ways in which it can integrate into smart cities and the grid that I think the economies are going to be very significant once the price point for electrical batteries hits the palatable range and has that reliability. And that's why, again, notwithstanding shared economies in many different areas becoming salient, I still think in the automotive space, people continue to buy. I think that they're buying smarter vehicles. I mean, we're expecting, I think by 2030, in excess of 350 different models of electrical vehicles. So for us as an industry, in the insurance industry and the vehicle services contract industry, it's about recognizing the trend, building products and services that respond to that consumer that are purchasing that, and enhancing the value proposition through the connectivity. And one of the key impediments to this is that the manufacturers look at that data as proprietary to them. The problem with that is they don't own the vehicle. And as long as they don't own the vehicle, it's the consumer that has it. And so one of the big things that I put in here is a regulatory and compliance. And what we're seeing in the legal infrastructure is the fact that it hasn't caught up to this world yet. But it's only a matter of time. And when it does, and it ensures that the data is owned by the consumer, they are going to have the commodity of value. And that's where there's going to be a greater requirement for us to service that by giving value for that, notwithstanding them paying for it. And with that vehicle data that today, for example, if a manufacturer has an extended warranty and won't share that with a third-party administrator, now when that model breaks up, you as the consumer of the vehicle, if you can now buy an extended warranty from any entity and have the data available to them so that you can deliver this full life cycle value. And so I think law and regulation have a ways to go, but that will ultimately mean that the consumer will own the data, and this entire value proposition can be enabled without any barrier from the OEM. There you are. Thank you.